Imagine a warm summer day in Sarajevo in 1914. The streets are alive with the sound of people cheering, and at the centre of it all is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. But beneath the surface, not everyone is celebrating. Tensions are brewing, and in just a few hours, history will change forever. Franz Ferdinand wasn't just a royal figure. He represented the future of a fragile empire, a melting pot of cultures, languages, and political ambitions. Austria-Hungary was teetering on the edge, struggling to maintain control over its diverse population. By 1914, nationalism was at its peak across Europe. Different ethnic groups in the empire were pushing for more autonomy, and Franz Ferdinand had a plan to address this tension. He envisioned a United States of Greater Austria, where Slavic people would have greater representation. But Franz Ferdinand's vision didn't sit well with everyone. In particular, Serbian nationalists saw his visit to Sarajevo as a threat. Serbia had its own ambitions for the Balkans, hoping to unite Slavic peoples under one flag, free from Austro-Hungarian control. This is where the story of Gavrilo Princip comes in. Princip was a young Bosnian Serb, part of a nationalist group called Young Bosnia. This group, along with the secretive Black Hand organization, was determined to fight for Serbian independence, no matter the cost. The Black Hand, led by Colonel Dragotin Dimitrijevic, aimed to overthrow Austrian influence in the Balkans. They trained young nationalists, like Princip, to carry out violent acts against the empire. For them, Franz Ferdinand's visit on June 28th, coinciding with St. Vitus Day, an important Serbian holiday, was the perfect opportunity. On that fateful day, Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, paraded through Sarajevo in an open car. They believed it was a symbol of the empire's strength, but for Princip, it was the chance he had been waiting for. The Sarajevo Incident. The morning of June 28, 1914 began like any other day in Sarajevo, but beneath the surface, the city was a pressure cooker of tension. Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, had arrived in the city as part of a goodwill tour, but not everyone was thrilled about their visit. In the crowd lurked several conspirators, including Gavrilo Princip, armed with a deadly mission. Princip wasn't alone. Along with 5 other conspirators, they were stationed at various points along the procession route. Each man carried a weapon, guns, bombs, and a single goal: to assassinate the Archduke. This wasn't just a random act of violence. For members of Young Bosnia, this was an act of revolution. At 10:10 AM, the Archduke's motorcade made its way down the Appel Quay. The first attempt to kill Franz Ferdinand came from a man named Nedjeljko Kabravonik. As the car passed him, Kabravonik hurled a bomb directly at the Archduke's vehicle, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. The bomb bounced off the folded roof of the car and exploded under the vehicle behind them. Chaos erupted in the streets. Several officers and bystanders were injured, but the Archduke and his wife emerged unscathed. Kabravonik, thinking he had failed, swallowed a cyanide pill and jumped into the nearby river. But the cyanide didn't work, and the river was too shallow to drown him. He was quickly apprehended by the authorities. Franz Ferdinand, visibly shaken but unharmed, demanded to continue with the day's events. He remarked, "So this is how they welcome their guests, with bombs?" But the worst was yet to come. The conspirators weren't finished, and Princip would soon seize his moment. After the failed bombing, Franz Ferdinand and Sophie pressed on with their official duties, but the streets of Sarajevo were now on high alert. The conspirators had scattered, unsure of what to do next. Meanwhile, the Archduke planned to visit the wounded officers at the hospital, changing his route, a decision that would prove fatal. At around 10:45 AM, as the motorcade made its way through Sarajevo, a driver accidentally took a wrong turn onto Franz Josef Street. As the car tried to reverse, it stalled. In that exact moment, Gavrilo Princip, who had been wandering the streets, found himself face to face with the Archduke's car. This was Princip's chance. Standing just 5 feet away, he pulled out his pistol. In an instant, he fired 2 shots. One bullet hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck, while the second struck Sophie in the abdomen. Both would die within minutes. As the Archduke lay bleeding in his car, his final words were to his beloved wife, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." But it was too late. Within minutes, both were dead, and the world was forever changed. Princip was immediately arrested. He later claimed that he never intended to harm Sophie, that he had only meant to kill the Archduke. But the damage was done. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand set in motion a series of events that would plunge Europe into the deadliest war it had ever seen. The aftermath of the assassination. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie sent shockwaves through Europe. In Austria-Hungary, the royal family was in mourning, but the real focus quickly shifted from grief to revenge. Within hours of the assassination, the Austro-Hungarian government began plotting its response. They believed that Serbia was behind the attack, and they weren't going to let it slide. At the heart of Austria-Hungary's reaction was a simple yet dangerous assumption. Serbia, or more specifically, Serbian nationalists, had orchestrated the assassination. The involvement of the Black Hand, a secret Serbian nationalist group, fueled this belief. But was Serbia really responsible? Serbia, for its part, denied direct involvement, but the truth was more complicated. While the Serbian government didn't plan the assassination, some officials had knowledge of the plot. Austria-Hungary saw this as enough evidence to act, and they decided to issue an ultimatum to Serbia, one that would spark the beginning of the July crisis. On July 23rd, Austria-Hungary delivered an ultimatum to Serbia with a list of harsh demands, including allowing Austrian officials to investigate the assassination within Serbia. This ultimatum was designed to be unacceptable, a provocation meant to justify military action. Serbia, knowing the stakes were high, accepted most of the demands, but refused to let Austrian officials operate within its borders. This small refusal would be all that Austria-Hungary needed to declare war. But the conflict didn't just involve these two nations. The alliances and rivalries that had been brewing for years would soon pull all of Europe into the fray. As the ultimatum was delivered, other European powers began to take notice. Russia, bound by its alliance with Serbia, started mobilizing its army. The Tsar couldn't ignore the threat possessed by Austria-Hungary's aggression. Meanwhile, Germany, Austria-Hungary's closest ally, promised unconditional support in what became known as the Blank Check. Germany's blank check was a turning point. By pledging support to Austria-Hungary in any military action, Germany essentially gave them the green light for war. At the same time, France and Britain, who were allied with Russia, began to prepare for the possibility of conflict. Europe was now on the brink of disaster. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand wasn't just the act of a single man or a small group of conspirators. It was the spark that ignited decades of pent-up political and military tension. The dominoes had begun to fall. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. What followed was a series of rapid escalations that dragged the rest of Europe into the conflict. By August 4, 1914, Germany had declared war on Russia and France, and Britain had entered the war after Germany invaded neutral Belgium. The assassination of one man had spiraled into a global conflict. What started as a political crisis in the Balkans quickly escalated into the Great War, World War I. The July Crisis. After the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the diplomatic stage was set for one of the most intense and consequential months in European history, the July Crisis. This wasn't just a case of nations rushing into war, it was a series of deliberate actions and reactions, driven by old alliances, nationalist fever, and strategic miscalculations. With Russia mobilizing, Germany was quick to react. They had been planning for a scenario for years, and their military strategy, known as the Schlieffen Plan, was ready. Germany knew that if war came, they would be fighting on two fronts, against France in the west and Russia to the east. The Schlieffen Plan aimed for a quick, decisive victory over France by invading through Belgium, before turning eastward to face Russia. On July 31st, Germany issued an ultimatum to Russia, demanding an end to their mobilization, but Russia refused. Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st. 2 days later, Germany also declared war on France, and the Schlieffen Plan was put into action. As German troops marched into neutral Belgium, Britain, bound by a treaty to defend Belgian neutrality, had no choice but to join the conflict. In just over a month, Europe had gone from a diplomatic crisis to the brink of total war. What had started as a regional conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia had spiraled into a global catastrophe. The July crisis wasn't just about the assassination. It was about long-standing rivalries, military plans set in stone, and the failure of diplomacy. By the first week of August, the stage was set for the most devastating war the world had ever seen. Nations on both sides were confident for a quick victory, but no one could have predicted the horrors that lay ahead. The Great War was about to begin. But the consequences of this war would be far greater than anyone imagined. Over the next 4 years, millions would die on battlefields across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Entire empires would collapse. Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Tsarist Russia would all cease to exist by the end of the war. The economic and social consequences were also staggering. World War I left Europe in ruins. Entire cities were destroyed, economies shattered, and millions of young men lost their lives. In many ways, the war set the stage for even greater conflicts to come. Perhaps the greatest consequence of the assassination was the long-term impact on global politics. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, placed full blame for the war on Germany and imposed harsh reparations. This treaty, while meant to secure peace, instead sowed the seeds of resentment that would grow into World War II. But the question remains, could it have been avoided? Some historians argue that the war was inevitable, given the political and military tensions of the time. Others believe that better diplomacy could have prevented the catastrophic chain reaction. What do you think? Was the Great War destined to happen, or could it have been stopped? One thing is certain. The lessons of World War I remind us of the dangers of nationalism, unchecked militarism, and the failure of diplomacy. It's a reminder that history has the power to repeat itself if we aren't paying attention. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And join us next time as we continue exploring the corridors of history.